Next up is our segment, narrow-minded, focus on narrow gauge, um, getting more out of your test track. But before we do that, the sponsor for narrow-minded is Carroll Creek Designs.
Carroll Creek Design Group is an innovative new model railroad supplier with products for all scales. The Carroll Creek team uses advanced processes, including resin and filament 3D printing and laser engraving and cutting. These tools enable us to produce a range of products. We produce different rolling stock and motive power models in multiple scales. We are narrow-minded and focus on narrow gauge and unique backwoods models. We have a great selection of ON30, ON18 and HON3 products. Our product range includes complete kits, ready-to-run models, and detail parts. In addition to our products, we are available for custom design, 3D printing, and laser cutting. See our products on our webpage at the QR code. We look forward to meeting you.
Well, next up is Steve Sherrill, getting more out of your test track. Steve?
Thank you. Good evening. Today we're going to be talking about test tracks. And I am going to show you how I designed my test track to solve some of the problems that I was having on my layout. And maybe you can either adopt some of them, make new test track situations, or just continue to use what you're doing. First off, I want to thank Bob Gelmacher for doing the photos on here. So Bob, if you will show the first photo.
Okay, Phil, can you give me share rights, please?
What we need to do first is to find a good location that we want to have for our test track.
You should be able to share, Bob, no problem.
Okay, are you seeing the first slide?
No, I don't think you're sharing yet. There you go.
Okay. So in my situation, I have a work area, and behind me, I have an operator's desk. And on the operator's desk, of course, is a flat surface where you normally would keep your log books and things like that during an operating session. And so that's the area that I use. It's exactly the same height as my workbench. And I have an office chair, so I just spin the chair around, and I can take whatever model I'm working on, place it on the test track, and I have a good working area. So Bobby, show the second one. I had a test track that I had made for ON30. Currently, I am working on micro layouts for ON18. So I took the ON30 bookshelf that I was using, and I converted that using the same track roadbed and everything, and just laying new track down. And I got to thinking, well, you know, I made some mistakes on the old one. Number one mistake was not having a re-railer. And you can see on this one, I have a re-railer. Very important when you're using small wheeled boxcars and locomotives and things like that. It's just much easier to deal with. One of the things I did was I used the switches, the same switch that I was going to use on my micros. I think it's very important to have a switch on your test tracks because you have a lot of problems sometimes with gauge of wheels, the little horn hook things from KD couplers that catch, and you need to get the right height, the clearance. So this is one thing that you need to do. I also, if you notice, the bumpers on the ends were old HO bumpers. They're rather large, and the scale here doesn't make much difference. All you want to do is to stop a runaway locomotive or a car. And so they worked out real well. I got a whole box of that HO brass track stuff. for like $10. And so I just started modifying some of it to use on my test track. But as you can see, one of the skills that you can develop on making a test track is soldering. And I took the solder and soldered two wires to the rail, and then I take alligator clips and hook them on. You'll also notice here it's very important to have a 110 outlet so that you can plug in your transformers or whatever you're using to power the track. And so it's very, very important to have that, and that's very local. It's very easily operated below the operator's desk. So once you gather your supplies for building this, it's real simple. I just put down yellow glue and glued the stuff down. Another use for test tracks besides your locomotives and cars is the buildings. If you want to have see how a building looks on your track, you can do that. And I think one of the pictures we have is of that. And so Bob, if you want to, I don't know if you have that one next or not. Yeah, okay, here we are at the end when I was talking about the re-railer. Very important to have a re-railer with enough room after it to make sure the cars are on the track. Here you can see another important thing that I incorporated into my test track was a way to hang it up. When I'm not using this, I have a hook under my railroad, and I take it and I hook the handle there on the end, and it sits up out of sight and out of the way. But you can also see how the bumpers I used, I just cut them off and modified them and glued them on the end. So basically, I'm using the same things that you see here on my micro layouts to build them. And that's the cork road bed, the Pico track. And so, Bob, if you have the next one. So here, I've been working on something here for the switch. I'm trying to develop something because this is a single piece of wood. There's not much room to have any kind of a mechanism that's going to activate and pull the points on the Pico switch. So I'm working on something that I can do on top, and I don't think I have a final picture of this, where it goes through the connection onto the points and pulls it. That's a portable thing, and I could do it on every single one of these switches. So I'm working on that. That's a problem. Test tracks are really problem-solving areas. Whether it's a wheel problem, a locomotive operation problem. Over top of this, I have a hanging light that gives me really adequate lighting so I can see any problems I might have. So Bob, you put the next one up, please. Okay. Now, as you can see here, we have the bumper again, and that gives you an idea of that. But I was having trouble with the soldering. And so I had to go back 3 or 4 times until I got exactly the way I wanted. So I worked by working on that. You know, I didn't go on my layout to put a big blob of solder on to get the wires, which I see on a lot of layouts, which is very unattractive, and it always comes up in a picture. So this was one of the things I was working on. Now, some people would put a coupler height gauge on the end of the track, so it would be right there. But since I use Lincoln pins, it doesn't matter whether they're the right height or not. The link is very flexible vertically. Now, one of the problems that we have in ON18 is we use N-scale wheels and wheel sets and trucks. So if you can see the comparison between an HO truck, which is on the boxcar, and an N scale truck, there's quite a bit of difference in the looks. Um, I know that this is a problem that's being worked on, and so if you show the next slide, I tried to solve this problem myself by taking HO trucks, sliding the wheels into N scale, and putting it on the track. Now, if you can see the red truck there, you can see one of the problems you run into when you don't have any assistance. You're just doing this by eye. You can see the red truck doesn't line. The red wheel shelf does not line up with the other three. Okay, Bob, you want to go to the next one, please? So here is what we look at. You have an HO wheel, an N scale wheel in the middle, and then an ON3 wheel, an HON3 wheel on the SB&S boxcar. That was a boxcar I made in the 80s when I was an HON3. So you can see now which one will look better on the ON18 car. Of course, probably the HON3 car wheel set would look better on the ON18. So here's what I did. I had this problem. I contacted Bob Gelmacher from Carroll Creek, and I said, Bob, we got this problem. We need to resolve this. And because I'll show you what happens when you try to, Bob, we have one more slide, I believe. Here's what happens when you try to modify something that is just not good at all. Go ahead, Bob. This is a Nomi. I'm trying to push. You can see it go over the switch, and it'll see what happens. You get it's just not right. So, in contacting Bob, he took it upon himself to come up with the solution. And so Bob, he's with Carroll Creek, and he's going to explain some of the things he did to develop.
As soon as I can get out of this video, I'm going to explain it.
So does anybody have any questions now as far as where we are on making a test track? Okay.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody uses a test track. Probably they just have a piece of track that they sit on their bench and put power to it, run it back and forth, maybe clean wheels or something like that. Okay, Bob.
Yeah, when Steve came to me and Ryan, who's my partner, and Ryan's on here also, we started making a lot of ON18 rolling stock. Ryan has, and then the problem crept up, like Steve said, about the size of the wheels. So my first suggestion to Steve was stop using ON18, but that didn't fly. So so we decided to try to work this out, and Ryan had a number of the HNO3 trucks, and the picture that you see here on the right-hand side, this is the size of the HON3. So I decided in making a new truck that would accommodate the looks that we were looking for, and also the size of the wheels for N scale, is to use the basic dimensions of that HNO3 truck and try to make a truck that would do the job. And that's exactly what we did here. So you can see here's the HNO3. I mean, this is the N scale truck, and this is the final version of the truck that we wound up making.
That looks cool.
These are a couple of the bases that we're using for our ON18s. This is with the N scale or the N scale truck on here, and then here are the new trucks that we designed that accommodates the N scale wheels, but also I think gives a better look to the car. One of the critical factors in doing that design is this is the axle that actually goes between the wheels. The axle on the N scale, the ones that I've ran across, were 14 millimeters long and about 1 millimeter in diameter, and these tips here are only a 0.5 millimeter long. I tried to eyeball this a couple of times, and I found out that it didn't really work out well because I couldn't get things to the wheels to, number one, stay in the trucks, and number two, to roll nicely. So I actually put this under a microscope, and that's how I found out what this tip looked like. So it's that 18 millimeter, I mean, a half a millimeter long tip, and then it has a little bit of a rounded corner to it. It's not a real sharp point. And so in order to make our truck, I actually took and we designed, and we're using uh, um, a couple of different programs, but to draw the axle to the exact size that it was, and knowing that there's some play that we have to add in on anything that we make with a 3D printer, I decided to increase the diameter by 0.2 millimeters and also increase the length by about 2 millimeters. And that worked out pretty well. Then I went about designing the actual truck itself. And the truck is one object in my software, but the axles are another uh, uh, object in the software. And the nice thing about the software is, even though everybody talks about 3D printing being an additive process, because this is a object and this is an object, I can then take this object away from this object, and I wind up getting an exact fit for the sockets where those wheels or where the axle are going to go. I didn't have a video of the truck itself, but very, very pleased with how easily these trucks are rolling right now. And this is exactly what we're going to be adding and selling for our ON18 cars. What I'd like to do, and I think that's the end of my slides, I'd like to turn it over to Ryan. And Ryan is going to talk about another product that we're working on in ON18, and that's a rail truck. So Ryan, you want to take it from here?
Yeah, the trucks are available now online, so you should have full access to them. We have plenty of them in stock, and like Bob said, that they'll also be in addition to the ON18 cars. So if you pick up a car, it'll have the underframe with the trucks mounted on it, and but you will supply the wheels, because there's many different types of wheels out there, plastic, metal, so you can pick what you want, put in, but you'll have the trucks there for you.
Yeah, Ryan, let me add one thing there. It's an important point about the axles. I was able to pick up a whole box of N scale wheel sets at I think it was a Timonium show, and when I went through it, most of them were that 14 millimeter long by a millimeter in diameter, but there was also some in there that were a little bit longer and a little bit bigger in diameter. If that's the case, then what one might have to take a very small drill and ream out that socket just a little bit to make those odd size axles work. Good, right?
Yeah, and I've had to do that with a couple of the trucks that I have with the wheels. So just a small little drill, ream it out, and you're good to go. They'll roll very, very well. It actually adds some stability too, because if you notice, we increased the length of the wheelbase, so the cars are much more stable and roll really well. Like I said, there were two products were coming out in March. The ON18 trucks. We're going to be introducing a ON18 rail truck. They will be available March 20th. It will be using a Kato 11-109 drive unit. So there's our rail truck. It'll come standard with the stake body bed. It'll also be able to wire the headlights in if you want to put LEDs in. You can use the standard. If you know anything with us, everything is kind of standard. Using the base that we have for our diesel engines, you can do the Kato 109 and then whatever couplers that you want in them. So everything is kind of universal. So with the truck, let me get it so it goes up. We'll have that available March 20th. You'll also have the capability, if you want, to do a box on the back, like the Durango US mail truck. So that'll be available as a separate piece if you want. You can do dead rail with that. Top opens. So plenty of room inside, battery, receiver. I had a couple guys ask if we're going to do, they wanted to do a fire truck. So we did a tank version that will be available for the back. All these just pop right on, so you can have whatever you're looking for and how you want to do them. But those will be available March 20th on the website. We'll also be at the Midwest Narrow Gauge Show in Ohio. Those will be available there also. So those are our two new products for the month of March. March Madness.
Wow. Wow. Does anyone have any thing that they want to add on test tracks? I mean, what kind of test track are you using? Like Jeff Jordan, what kind of test track are you using?
I made up just a spare sheet of Homosote, and I have tacked to it several different gauges of track. I have HO track on it, which I can use for HO equipment, and ON30. I use a length of HON3 track on there, and a length of N scale track to accommodate all the different things that I work on. I like your suggestion of adding a re-railer, especially in the N scale stuff. Getting it on by eye is tricky. And I had not thought of previously the idea of putting a switch on your test tracks so you could test running not just back and forth, but make sure that it tracks through the turnout. And I have enough spare turnouts lying around that I think it's a good suggestion to add a spare turnout to the end of each section to get that additional test in the process. And mine, like yours, is portable. So when I'm not using it, I can pick it up and lean it in the corner. And I power it by just clipping it directly to my layout with alligator clips. So if I want to use DC power, I can do that. If I want to use DCC, I can do that too.
Do you use that for programming track at all?
Actually, no, but that's because I am transitioning to the Bluenami decoders, and so I do all my programming through my phone now.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
Yes. Steve, this is Phil Edholm. I just a side comment. So at the club I'm part of, we have an O standard gauge, ON3, and HO. And one of the members built on a about 3-inch wide, 1-inch thick piece of wood, about 8 feet long, laid the 4 rails. So you have on the outside, you have the standard gauge, then you have HO and HO and the ON3 laid out there on that, and put a switch in place so you can switch between those three gauges. So you can choose whether you want the O, the HO, or the ON3. And then you can another switch where you can choose either to go DC, DCC track, or DCC programming. And it makes it really effective for programming in volume where we do locomotives. You put a locomotive on, you can test to make sure it works just fine when you set it up using DCC power, flip it over to programming, which is connected to JMRI, program it, then flip it back and test and make sure it works, and you can do any scale you want. So, I think if you're doing multiple scales, something like that's very effective.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I agree with you on that. That'd be very helpful.
Hey, Steve.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. On my layout, I have a programming track that's basically, well, I have 2 of them that are sidings, and with a double pull, double throw that happens to be center off, I can switch from normal operation, DCC, or switch it over to programming. So it's sort of a test track, sort of, but a built-in programming track anyway.
Well, when I thought about this segment, I went to YouTube and tried to see if I could get any research on test tracks, and there was nothing on YouTube at all with anybody talking about test track. And so I said, maybe there's something to this. Most people probably just put it on their layout and think that that's going to be adequate. And it may be. But most of the time you have to get away from your bench, go to your layout. It becomes inconvenient. If you're working on a locomotive, you want to see how it operates. Hey, I just spin my chair and put it on the test track and see if it operates the way I want it to run. So to me, that it's convenience is pretty important for a test track.
I like the idea that you incorporate a turnout on the test track, because it isn't really indicative of the performance of a locomotive just running on a straight track that has no obstacles to work through, if you will, because all kinds of things can happen.
Well, I used the Pico turnout and power through the points. And so the wiring of it was very simple. I could run actually two locomotives, because I could put one on the dead rail that didn't have the points thrown that way, and make sure everything was okay. It was easy to wire. So it was just, it's a convenient thing, and I can actually take it with me if I have a question and I want to take it to somebody's house, to test the locomotive and have them look at the problem. All I have to do is grab it by the handle and take it to their house. So there's a lot to be said to having a handle at the end of the test track also.
I think the idea of the turnout, I have a locomotive at the moment that the leading truck seems to misbehave and jump and, come off derail basically. And, I'd have to fix it on I don't have a test track, but if I had a turnout on there, I could sort it out on the bench rather than standing up in the layout, figuring out what the hell's going on. Yeah. So that's an interesting innovation, really, to incorporate a turnout. You don't normally see that at train shows, just see straight track, for example. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Hey, Steve.
Yes.
Yeah, it's Greg. Can I tell you real quick about the test track I made years ago? When I was building lots of cars for my layout, one thing I wanted to make sure was that I had constant rolling resistance. I could weigh the cars and make sure that the weights were proper for their size. But my test track, I made it a little over a yard long, and I put a couple of just narrow sides on it. And I've got another piece of wood, and I can elevate one end. And so I started timing all of the cars after I built them, how long they would take to roll down. And as long as they were consistent, I was happy. If there was one that would take longer to roll down, I knew there was some kind of problem with the trucks or the weight or something like that. So I double checked that one. And that got all my cars pretty consistent in terms of their rolling resistance. And again, it's still just a straight track, and I can test locomotives on it by just taking the upright out, and it sits flat, and I clip a transformer onto the end rails. So it kind of does double duty. The only thing I don't have is a turnout on it.
Oh, that's an innovative idea with the grade.
Yeah, well, I was learning that I wanted them to all roll correctly because I was going to have long trains, and I think that helped.
Yeah, definitely. I hadn't thought about that idea. The grade going up, for testing the grade that a locomotive could go up before it starts spinning. That'd be something to know also.
Well, I know on my layout, I can pull about 60 coal cars as long as I have 3 locomotives on front and 2 on the back. Otherwise, they start slipping.
Wow. Yeah.
That's a lot of horsepower.
That's a lot of grade too.
That's a lot of train, Wow. Well, that's all I have tonight.
Well, that was interesting as always, Steve. And Bob, appreciate featuring Carroll Creek and featuring you this evening was great. And yeah, something to think about, right?
Yeah.
And Ryan.
And
Thanks,
Ryan, sorry.
Yeah.
Right.
we actually resolved the problem that was a pretty serious problem in my way of thinking when the trucks just didn't look right.
Yeah, well, you can see how Carroll Creek's moving the ball forward with ON18 and adding one product at a time.
Yeah.
This is really the future of the hobby, is taking advantage of these 3D printing. So, all right, I appreciate you guys. We'll see you next time.